What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. I'm currently sitting in my Ford Escort van and I've got a day off, but there's no rest for the wicked. I've got to crack on because the Escort van has got quite a dangerous fault on it at the moment, which I'm going to try and rectify in this video, along with fitting a load of other parts. And I do need to look at my sister's car at the end of the video, so let's have a look at the major fault. So let's dive in straight away to the symptoms of this major fault. So I only just started to notice it over the past week, and what it is the handbrake warning light, or the brake warning light on this van, is still illuminated when the handbrake is off. So let me show you guys. I'll just start it up. Right, so as you can see there, the brake light is still illuminated, and what I'm going to do now is release the handbrake. Oh, well, it's shown me up. It's actually stayed off, but what it has been doing is it's been flickering. I'll just try and show you, sort of like that. I'm obviously just pulling up the handbrake, but that's what it's been doing as I've been driving along. So when this fault first arose, I thought that it could be sort of the wire going to the handbrake, because I've had all the dash apart and the centre console to replace the heater box a couple of months back, and if I didn't connect it properly or left it loose, then it might have just wriggled its way loose and then the warning light come on the dash. But I've checked all of that and it was all good. So I headed straight under the bonnet and checked the brake fluid level. So when I popped open the bonnet and checked the brake fluid level, I noticed that it was sitting right on the minimum, and now it's back on the minimum. I only topped this up a couple of days ago, and this is indicating to me that there must be a leak. So what I'd done before I started to check all the brake lines for leaks, I thought, let's just have a quick glance underneath the back of the van, and well, I was quite shocked at how bad it was, to be honest. As you guys can see, we're now currently looking at the near side rear wheel, and that is nice and dry. But as we pan over to the offside rear wheel, we can see that that is leaking like anything. As you can see, it's all on the tyre down there, all on the inside of the wheel. And yeah, I would say we've definitely got a leaky rear wheel cylinder to change. So with that discovery, I popped across to my local parts company, Bennett's, and I picked up this rear wheel cylinder for my Escort van. Now this was just £10 and 5p, which I think is an absolute bargain. What we're going to do is start to strip apart the rear brakes on the offside rear. But just before I do that, I'll show you a couple other parts I picked up. I did buy these two shock absorbers for the Escort van. I thought, considering we're going to be working at the back, there's no better time than to change these two rear shock absorbers. As you can see, someone has painted the bottom of the rear shocks in red oxide. I'm not sure why. I think they were just a little bit scabby, but I am noticing a little bit of a knock from the rear end. There's no better place to start than by changing them shocks that look like they've been on there for quite a few years. As I say, we've still got to look at my sister's car towards the end of this video, so let's see where the day takes us. And I'm going to first start by replacing this rear wheel cylinder. I've now got the rear brake drum off. That just needed a couple of taps, and I just got the screwdriver around it in different areas and just pried it off. Anyway, we can see clearly here that the cylinder has popped out, and you can see that that rubber boot has popped off as well. So yeah, we're definitely going to be replacing this rear wheel cylinder. As you can see, the rest of the shoes and the rear brake assembly is saturated in brake fluid, where it's just been leaking over time and it's just got progressively worse. I'll have to strip all of this off and clean them all up. The rear shoes don't look bad at all. They actually look in quite good condition, I'd say. The brake drum itself as well hasn't got much of a lip, so really happy with that. I'm just going to clean this all up with some brake cleaner. But first things first, I need to strip it all apart because, well, we need to get to that bad boy. Right, let's get stripping these rear shoes apart. I used to hate working on these when I was first an apprentice. That was nearly 9 years ago now. Yeah, basically nowadays I absolutely love working on them, but you just have to take your time, make sure you know where everything sits. I like to lay it out down below, so yeah, let's get cracking and take off some of these springs so we can just get everything apart. Normally the first one I do is this bottom spring, nice and tight. There we go. Right, so that's loosened up the bottom bits. Now we just got to do these two little clips that holds the shoes to the backing plate. So all I've got to do is put a little bit of pressure on it and then get the mole grips in and twist that little pin around. Bit of pressure, twist the pin around, nearly there. There we go. Didn't really want it to fly off, but that's what happens. The pin goes through like that, and then you just twist it and it's not going to come out, so you just have to put a bit of pressure on, twist it, and it's out. That's the top spring removed. That's another little spring removed. This one here. Bit of a fiddly one, I'll tell you that. Little one there. It's starting to come apart really nice and easy. We're just taking off this shoe and you've got the handbrake cable attached. All you've got to do is pull it back and it'll just come across to this hole here and it should pop out. There we go. Job's a good one. And with that shoe taken care of, I think we can take the other one out. Yep, there we go. That's got all the adjuster with it as well. And just like that, we have removed all of the rear brake setup. It's pretty easy to remove, but a little bit more challenging to refit, but we'll get to that soon. Anyway, we've got to replace this rear wheel cylinder, so gonna unbolt it in a minute, but I just wanted to show you guys how I've laid out the setup down here. As you can see, both of your rear brake shoes, the adjuster, and all the springs in the places that they go. Once you've got it all laid out like that, it all looks fairly simple. You remember where everything goes, and the job goes a lot smoother. Now I've just come back underneath the Escort van because just before we start to remove that rear wheel cylinder, I want to try and reduce the amount of brake fluid that we're going to lose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp off one of these flexies. It's going to be this one. Right, so here we are with said brake hose. Just want to get this clamped up nice and tight to stop any fluid coming out. There we go. Happy days, that'll do. Now that I've clamped off the brake pipe, I can release this hard pipe from the back of the cylinder. Oh, that's actually quite easy to remove, luckily. Normally these are either seized on or just, yeah, pretty horrible to take off, but this one seems to be coming off nice and easily. There we go. And the last thing we've got to do is remove the two bolts that hold the cylinder on. It's just two 8mm just underneath. Oh, that weren't meant to happen, but that's the reason it's leaking. And there we go, just like that, the rear wheel cylinder has come out. Now this is the actual issue, the seal here, that's obviously failed, which is allowing brake fluid to come past that. It fills up this boot and then it obviously pops off in the end. So yeah, glad we've got that off. Now everything is removed, it's time for the cleanup operation to start. All I've got to do is just dose this in brake cleaner and we'll get it all looking nice and, well, I wouldn't say new, but presentable again. After a little bit of cleaning, I'm sure we can all agree that that is looking a whole lot better. The back and plate is nice and clean now. And I've just got the new rear cylinder out of the box and I'm just marrying it up with the old one. They're both exactly the same. The only thing that the new one doesn't come with is a little cap to go on that bleed nipple, but that's all right. I can nick that off the old one. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and get this one fitted and then we can start to clean up all of these bits which have just been drenched in brake cleaner. And it's a very simple process, just like the removal. Slide it in there and we'll find our two bolts, tiny little bolts that hold the brake cylinder in. And that is the new rear wheel cylinder all bolted up, and I've just connected the rear brake line to it as well. Now what I'm going to do next is just add a tiny bit of copper grease to this backing plate. There's 3 sections on each side. As you can see, now this is just where the rear shoes sit. People might be screaming at their TV right now saying, what am I doing? But this is just the way I do it. It's where the rear shoes contact the backing plate, so just give them a tiniest bit of grease, just like you do with the front brake pads when they're sitting in the carrier. As you can see, just a tiny bit, not a lot. And there we go, we are ready to start refitting our shoes. Just get this first one in like that. I've just got this first brake shoe on, it's really fiddly, trying to get them clips on. I'll try and show this other side, but just before I put it on, I've got to reattach the handbrake cable down the bottom here. There we go, that's all clipped on now. There we go, right, just need a little bit of adjustment. That is the second one all clipped on, as you can see. Okay, now both of the shoes are in place and sitting there, but we've got the springs to fit. Now when you come to fit the springs on the rear shoes, normally it will just throw one of the shoes off, and it's really annoying and it can be quite stressful, to be honest. But what I do is I now introduce my magic tool, which is a little ratchet strap. What I do is I put this all the way around the shoes and tighten them up. Consequently, it means there's no movement and you can put the springs in much easier. Right, here we go. So I've got the ratchet strap all set up, and what you should be able to see is as I tighten it up, you see how everything moves in? Now what we can do is we can centralise the cylinder and everything is where we want it. So when we start putting some pressure on this, then the shoes aren't going to move away from us. So now, yeah, that's ready to go. Right, so I'm just going to show you guys how beneficial it is to put this ratchet strap around the shoes. So I'm just going to put this top spring in. I'm going to be using the mole grips again because I just find this is the best tool for the job. Holds them nice and tight and you can get it where you want. And we've got to go across to here. So as you can see, we've got to stretch quite a bit. But as I can just lever that towards it, it does move a little bit still, but look how easy that was. I'm not completely fighting against the shoes. I really do think this is the best tool for doing rear shoes. We've also got this little spring that goes at the top. I think this is going to be a bit of a pain, but we're going to have to get it on either way. So let's try and get it in the first hole. That'll be a start. Now sometimes it is worth noting what sides you pull the spring from. I've just changed ends. I was on this end to start off with, now I've gone on this end. I just think it's going to be easier, and I think I've already got it in basically. Yeah, look at that. So much more easier, and sometimes they just need a little tap home, so get the screwdriver in there. There we go. All that's left to do is the third and final spring, so this just sits in there. Now this should be a nice, smooth, straightforward one. Nope. Go on. I'll just say that was going to be a smooth and straightforward one. Certainly weren't. Bit more tension on the mole grips. Push it up and in. Job's a good one. And all that's left to do now is just to release the ratchet strap, release all the tension, and there you have it. Your complete brake setup, all with the springs attached. And just before we start to bleed up the brake system, I'm just going to clean out the brake drum because that has had a lot of brake fluid in it, sitting in it. But as I did say, there's hardly no lip on there. I reckon these drums have been changed quite recently, to be honest, possibly over the past year. So I'm just going to give this a good wipe up, make sure there's no brake fluid left in them. Now the rear drum is back on, I have removed the clamp that was clamping up the brake line, and I have just attached my bleed bottle just here. I've cable tied it onto the leaf spring just so it doesn't dangle all the way down, and the pipe ends up coming out and brake fluid goes everywhere. Anyway, I've then plugged that into the back of the rear cylinder and onto the nipple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my assistant to press down on the pedal, and then when the pedal is pressed, that'll be open, and then I'll close it off and they'll lift it back up, and repeat the process until there's no more air bubbles that are coming out. There we go, so I just bled up the brakes and that went nice and smoothly. I've just done up the nipple and I put on the little cap, and I've just checked a few bits over to make sure they're all tight, and that is all good. So that bled up perfectly. I waited till the air bubbles stopped and there's just a constant flow of brake fluid, so that is all good. As we go around to the bonnet, the brake fluid was being topped up every now and again, and it is now sitting at maximum, so I'm very happy with that. Okay, now that that rear brake cylinder is all changed, I'm going to start on the shock absorber for this side. Now the English weather has come out and it started raining slightly, but we're going to crack on nonetheless. I've had a look, and what I'm going to have to do is undo this bottom bolt, and then I'm going to have to undo 4 at the top, which sort of hold in a plate that the shock absorber bolts to. You can't get to the top shock absorber bolt without removing it, so I'm just going to remove them bits and bobs now, get the old shock off, and then we can have a look at it. There we go, I've just got the old shock absorber off of the Escort van, and as we can see, it's in pretty bad condition. It's a bit scabby, but also the bushes are fairly worn, and as you can see, it does not rebound back. Yeah, so that is knackered. Anyway, as expected, it's just got this little bolt at the top here that connects the top half of the shock absorber. So all I'm going to do now is get the new one connected up and then get it bolted onto the vehicle. Now, just before I fit that new shock absorber, I just wanted to pay a bit of attention to this section here. So I know this is a real prone place for the Mk6 Escort vans to rot. And as you can see, mine is starting to go there, but all of this is solid. It's just starting to go. Someone's put some under seal on it, but I can feel that's nice and strong still, so I'm happy with that. It won't be long before that sort of eats away at it though, so I would like to get that addressed at some point. Anyway, let's get this new shock absorber fitted. And there we have it, all the bolts for the shock absorber are now done up, them top 4 and that bottom lower one. There's not much really left to do on this side. I've put a little bit of copper grease around that hub just to stop the wheel from sticking to it, but I'm really happy with how that has gone. I'm going to whack on the wheel, then I'm going to jack up the other side just to check the shoes and make sure they're okay and the brake cylinder isn't leaking on that side, and then I'll go ahead and change that other shock absorber. I've just got the near side rear drum off. It did cause me a little bit of aggro, but a couple of hits with a hammer and getting a screwdriver in the edge seemed to work a treat. Now, this is what it should look like, not damp and wet like the other sides. As you can see, this top cylinder is all good. All the springs are in the right positions. The adjuster's looking fine. And yeah, it's all just looking nice and perfect, just like we want to see. Anyway, I'm going to get this drum back on and I'm going to change the shock absorber, but just before I do that, I wanted to show you guys inside these wheel arches. Look how clean they are. Like, it's quite hard to get across on camera sometimes how clean it is, but yeah, there's literally no rust, no rot under here, all solids, and you can even see the body colour sort of shining through. That's the near side rear shock absorber all removed now, but that was a bit of a pain in the arse. 3 of the bolts come out easily and I got to the last one and that was rounded off, so I've had to use my easy out, but luckily with this easy out that made a real easy job, excuse the pun, of removing that bolt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this bolt out of this socket so I can reuse that for my next rounded bolt I come across, and then what I'll do is I'll find a replacement. But I'm just going to show you guys the plate that's been welded up here. As you can see, we've got quite a hefty plate up here. Obviously this side rotted out first, and yeah, it's been welded in there. I don't think it's too much of a bad job, to be honest. All the holes still line up, and yeah, I'm fairly happy with it. It could do with a little bit of seam sealer on it and just a bit of under seal just to top it off, but yeah, that's been repaired previously, but I'm just glad all the bolt holes still line up. Okay, so that's the old shock out. That was toast as well, and I've just bolted the new shock on. I have found a replacement bolt here. I lost the ends just because it was a bit too long, so I chopped that off. But I was only just saying in the Fiesta van video a couple of weeks ago how my box of bolts comes in handy. So yeah, now I've got 4 bolts again. I'm going to get this new shock absorber all bolted up. And there we go, that's the shock absorber all bolted up now. You can see the nice new shiny bolt, and we've also done up that bottom one as well. And a little bit of copper grease on the hub. And I even started to clean up a little bit the chassis rail. Look how good that looks. Still got its colour to it. I'm sure these wheel arches will really scrub up nicely when I get round to doing them. That's the Escort van all done now. 2 rear shock absorbers and that rear brake cylinder. Really happy and got the job done. I have torqued all of the wheels now. Haven't really torqued the wheels since I bought this thing, so thought I'd better check, but the fronts were tight, and I re-torqued the back wheels. Anyway, if we scan around here, the KA has arrived, my sister's car, so our next job, let's get the Escort van off of the drive and the KA back on. So here is the next job, the Ford KA. This is my sister's trusty old steed. She's had this ever since she passed her test, which was quite a few years ago now. Doesn't seem to be too much going wrong with it, apart from when the other morning she rang me up and said she's got loads of brake lights on and said she needs to stop. Anyway, we diagnosed it and the brake fluid was low, and guess what? We've got another rear wheel cylinder leaking. Now, our obvious indication is these little splats that are going around the alloy wheel. That ain't good, because brake fluid getting on the bodywork, that's going to corrode it and cause it to flake off, but it doesn't seem to have done too much damage. And as you can see, the same story as mine, very damp, and it's even dripping right at the bottom there, so that's going to indicate that the brake cylinder is leaking. What's the chances of that? So what's the chances of that? 2 wheel cylinders in the same week. When my sister first rang me up, I thought, oh, what could that be? And I started thinking like brake lines and all sorts, because she used to go to university down south on the coast, and you know what happens with coastal areas and Fords, they just rust away. But luckily it's just a wheel cylinder. It's just funny that 2 have come at one time. So I'm going to start to get the rear wheel taken off and the drum, and then we'll see the true extent. But I just think it's quite funny how I've had 2 pop up in such a short space of time. She's got locking wheel nuts, a luxury that many of my cars don't have. But when we're dealing with them, we've got to take extra care, make sure we don't gun them off and ruin the alloy wheel socket, because I have done that before. Now on the trusty KA, it's got these 2 bolts that hold on the drum, but many drums don't have these, or they've snapped off in the past or whatever. It really doesn't need these, they're just to hold it in place while you put the wheel on, but as you bolt up the wheel, it's gonna push the drum nice and flush. Anyway, right, let's get the hammer, get that off. One tap. Oh my God. So what's happened here is, wow, where it's so bad, what's happened is the friction material from the brake shoes that's obviously been just floating around in here has almost like congealed. It's stuck with the brake fluid that's coming out of the cylinder, and it's created this, well, horrible paste of friction material and brake fluids. I would usually change the shoes as well, but they look like they've got a lot of meat on them. So what I'm going to do, I'm still going to stick with the plan because she needs this for work tomorrow. What I'll do is I'll clean up all of these parts the best I can and then see how she goes with it. Might be a case of after a few more miles, the friction material just starts working perfectly again once a little bit has been worn down. So yeah, we're still going to have to strip this apart and change the wheel cylinder tonight. Cool. I really did think we were going to be in for a long night then. What I was doing is trying to remove this hard brake line that goes into the back of the cylinder, and it was just twisting, so the actual fitting was twisting with the pipe. It means it seized together, and I really did think it was just going to snap off, but luckily after a little bit of persuasion, some WD-40 and just persevering with it, I've managed to free it off and got it out without snapping the pipe off or anything. But as you can see, it's an absolute mess in here, and that is the old brake cylinder there. definitely needed changing, probably worse than the Escort van, I'd say. Here's all the bits and bobs down here that all need a good thorough clean. Yeah, pretty messy one. So I better get to work and start cleaning this before I rebuild it. And oh yeah, there is one other thing I wanted to mention, is I'm surprised the ABS system hasn't been messing up, because as you see, that ABS ring has got loads of rubbish on it. As we just spin it around, that has got loads of rubbish picked up on it. So yeah, I'm surprised that hasn't been flagging up, because once I filled the fluid up, it was absolutely fine, the faults went. So, but either way, I'm going to be cleaning it up now. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've cleaned up this backing plate, which has come up nicely, although the paint is starting to flake off it, mainly because that's been dripping for quite some time. So yeah, it's to be expected really. I've also cleaned up down here all of the parts, and to be fair, these have came up really nicely. I think I remember changing these about a year or two ago, so yeah, they've cleaned up nicely. As I say, hopefully once we get a bit of wear on the friction material, it should be back to normal, and like the brake fluid hasn't soaked into them and caused any long-term damage. But I will be checking them again very soon, like give it a couple of months or so. But anyway, I'm going to start to build this back up again, just like I've done with the Escort van earlier, and then we can start to bleed the system and hopefully get the wheels back on. Well, it is now the next day, and I had a bit of a dramatic end to yesterday, because I was finishing off my sister's rear brakes. I was building it all back up again, and then I remembered she told me that the handbrake needed adjusting, so I had to take off the other drum and just adjust up the shoes slightly. I managed to get it nice. It's on about 4 to 5 clicks now, which is the perfect spot. But then the heavens opens and it just started chucking it down on me. Literally chucking it down. I was drenched from head to toe when I got in. So hence why there was no recording of that section of the video. But I just got the handbrake adjusted up and legged it back in. Nonetheless, it was a really successful day. I'm glad I've got that rear brake cylinder changed on the Escort van, because that had been leaking for a little bit and I really needed to get it changed. And also to fit them shock absorbers is great too. I drove to work this morning and there's no knocking from the rear, so I'm really glad we fitted them. And also, I've had no complaints from my sister, so her car must be stopping perfectly. I did take it on a little spin, and the change in the brake efficiency is crazy. It stops on the button now. It's really, really good. So yeah, really successful day. And I just wanted to ask you guys, would you be interested in a few more sort of day in a life type videos? Because my days are very hectic. That was a day off, and I get a day off from work in the week every other week. So yeah, I always try and record or create content, but sometimes it's not on the same vehicle. So if you guys sort of like the follow me along for a day video, then let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, if you did all enjoy this video, please give it a like, and if you like what you see, subscribe to the channel to see more. Thank you all for watching, and until the next one, I'll see you guys later.